So that said, let's just get going here. I'm excited to be working specifically with diocesan leaders because I know that when we do these broad webinars, we're talking to parish leaders, and it is very similar what they do and what you do, but you are sitting in a different seat and you have a different framework that you're working with. And so we wanted to speak directly to you. So Patty Rodriguez is coming to us from the Archdiocese of Newark, and they recently renamed their catechetical office to the Office of Lifelong Faith Formation. And I've been working with them for a few years, like pre-pandemic. We started on how can we reimagine what it means to be a catechetical office serving the diocese. We identified some challenges they were facing, which probably are similar to some that you've faced as well. And listen, they did the hard, persevering work. They lost their director. They went for an extended period of time with no director and everything in limbo, and kind of like, we can't really launch any major efforts right now because they want the new director to come in before we do that. But they were persistent and they carried it through and came out on the other side. So Patty, thank you for joining us, and give us kind of the short version of that. Why rename it, and how did you get to your new name?
Okay, thanks, John. Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to just see you all and to be with you this time during this time. So the short version is that we have been just really praying, trying to live into, reading, studying all of the things that have been happening in the church, right? The new directory, the Synod on Synodality. There was a lot of feedback here from when Cardinal Tobin first arrived and did town halls. That really surfaced a desire among the people to reach out and see new initiatives specifically for adult faith formation and throughout the lifespan. And, this is something that our office has always been working to, and we even have an associate director in our office that's dedicated to adult and family faith formation. But still, the image of the office has always been catechetical office works with children, and those children are in desks, and it's the CCD program, and that's what they oversee at the parishes. That's still the image that, and not only outside of the pastoral center here, the chancery offices, but even internally, that is really what, the image that people have of the office. So just in thinking about that here, the new pastoral vision for the Archdiocese, which was, kind of set forth, I guess, a couple of years ago, right pre-pandemic. So it's been difficult to kind of begin with that implementation, but right pre-pandemic, it's forward in faith together, right? And there were 6 pillars, and one of the pillars was lifelong faith formation and education. And so it just made sense to us. We approached the Archbishop, Cardinal Tobin, and said, we'd really like to change the name of the office officially to lifelong faith formation. And right away in the name, we get that sense that this is not just about the children in the seats. So, yeah.
Yeah, words matter and names of things matter. And I saw another office that it was Evangelizing Catechesis was the name they changed to. And, so many of these words, especially to parishioners, they don't know what that means. Right? Religious words, we do, and it's good, but we really want to connect with them. So what was the process of bringing those people on board? You shared a little bit of it, but we really want to do it in a more synodal way, listening, engaging people, getting buy-in. And when you're working upward with that can really take some stealth endeavors. How did you do that?
Stealth endeavors. I like
Yes.
that. So I think, first of all, like John said, we had quite the journey here over the 2 years that we really didn't have a director, and we were sort of wandering in the desert, in the wilderness for a while. But during that time, it did give us the opportunity to really just dig in and listen to our PCLs, right? Because they were also struggling in the midst of the crisis that COVID presented, right? And here, in particular in the Archdiocese of Newark, we were so really badly impacted, so seriously impacted by COVID. So really we were forced almost to really focus almost all of our energy on accompaniment, on really ministering to, caring for, listening to, walking with our PCLs so that they could sustain what they were trying to do at the parishes during that time. So as we did that, right, then we could see more clearly what the needs were and what was already within us, right? Because I think as diocesan leaders, I think, I don't know, we had a strong conviction always that our part of our role is to advocate for catechetical ministry. And so we've always been doing that. But I think that we were just so convicted in that the more time that we spent with our PCLs. And so I think, first of all, I would say patience, because, when we first began to present what the needs are, and the fact that the office needed to take a certain direction, we're just not sure if the transmission was being received, right? And so, but that means that we had to persevere. It would have been, I think, a lot easier for us. And certainly the temptation was there, in the midst of all the upheaval, to just say, you know what, let's just go about doing the best that we can do, right? But no, we just kept persevering. We just kept repeating the message. We need to broaden the scope of the office. We need to emphasize working with adults. We just kept persevering. And of course, prayer, right? So patience, perseverance, and prayer, which can't be understated, because that really just sort of helped us to persevere, strengthened us in our conviction. It was a big part of our discernment to pray together as a team regularly. And then preparedness. I mean, the bottom line is, really, when all of us, right, when we're making decisions about resources and how we're going to allocate the resources, we need to see that, they're going to be put to good use, and so there was definitely a need. I know this sounds a little bit strange, because we kind of feel like, but catechesis is of course central to the mission of the church. Why would I need to convince anyone of that? And I don't know that it was so much convincing. I mean, I think our leadership here is supportive, but I think we did have to make a case clearly to outline, well, it's not just important, but what exactly is this going to look like, right? So we were grateful for having had that time of listening, both through survey, written, quantitative data, qualitative data, interviews, listening sessions, all kinds of ways that we gathered information so that we could really feed that back, and have, just really be prepared to enter into that dialogue. It wasn't just something we had imagined,
Yeah.
or, something we had pulled, an idea that just we thought would be good, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
when you're a leader, when your bishop, your archbishop, uh, is going to allow a change like this, right? It's a huge risk for them, and it can't just be a whim that somebody had and they go, okay, let's do it. I mean, you're talking about something that's been a certain way for hundreds of years, probably, in the naming, and uh, and you brought them the data that said, hey, here's why we need to do this, and here's the responses that they had something to look at and make that decision from, and you did the hard work of that. And for those of you, that might be leaning that way or thinking about that, I'm grateful that people like Patty and other even parishes around the country have done this, so you can point to different places where it's happening and say, hey, this is not something I just made up. We see it happening around the country, and it really is to align with the new directory more, and that 5 task of catechesis model that we'll talk about. But I would say, if you really want to push your parishes and your PCLs more in that direction, a renaming or something kind of dramatic like this, a rewriting of your mission statement, gets people's attention. And it says, this isn't just some little side thing that is happening. This is a whole new era, and here's what we're doing. So you might consider that. If that is something that you guys are working on or have done at your diocese, will you put that in the chat and tell us what you're thinking about that? I'm going to throw in there something we've mentioned before. It's a PDF, and it's the Handbook on Catechetical Accompaniment. And it was created by the USCCB for publishers of curriculum to guide them to do that in this new directory model. And so it would also be good for parish and I'm sorry for diocesan leaders to use as you create your own framework and process for implementing this. So it's got great stuff in it. Patty, we talked about how when we first started talking on reimagining the future of your office and your department, something that is common with any institution is that when you work on the institutional level, the people that are boots on the ground kind of see you as someone who lives in an ivory tower. You have no concept as to what they're dealing with, even though you had their job at one point, right? And you're out of touch. You're authoritative. If raise your hand if you've ever experienced any of those kind of feelings from people on a parish level. Okay, it's not just Patty. What did you, and you said we want to change that. We're here for them. We love them. We care about them. We want to accompany them. What did you do to help communicate that and to get more connection relationally?
So I think really that, first of all, COVID presented an opportunity in that, okay? Because we really needed to step up our efforts in accompaniment and support, very practically speaking, right? In terms of guidelines, frameworks, structures, ideas, workshops on how to do things digitally, et cetera, right? So very practically speaking. And, we can have all the meetings we want, but unless people perceive them to be useful, right, that it's going to be something useful, they're really not going to attend. So at that point of need where they really needed the training and the support, we saw this incredible uptick in participation from amongst our parish catechetical leaders. And so we were able to kind of seize that opportunity, right? And so to communicate in every way possible, listen to what the needs were, respond. And then so that in a sense was a kind of gave us that input, that push, right? And we've been very intentional about creating safe spaces, right? And articulating that very clearly, like this is a safe space. We really want to hear what you're saying. And we'll even joke, like, we can take it. I wore my armor today. If you have your pitchfork, I'm pretty sure it's not going to penetrate. Like, we could do it, don't be afraid. A safe space where I think people won't feel judged for saying something, right? And they know they won't be offending anybody if they say something or ask a question or, so that we could kind of create these spaces where we could really hear authentically, not like all the comments after the meeting, but rather share them now here in the meeting directly, with us. And then finding ways to feed that back to them, right? So we've captured it via like our annual report, we've captured what is the one thing you really need? What can our office do? And we feed that back, this is what we've done, this is what you've said you needed. And this is what we're doing, right? This and realistically, and some things we don't have control over, right? We're not going to be able to fix everything or respond to everything, but I think there's just being honest and transparent in that also, I think has been helpful. So be in a sense, being accountable to them. You trusted us with this information and with your heart and your frustrations and your joys. And so this is what we're doing. I think it's been a real shot in the arm that I can bring that feedback directly to the Archbishop and say, this is what we've gathered from our sessions,
Yeah.
and, we just can lay it out there.
I know it can be a little scary to open it up like that, to let people share their frustrations, because a lot of them share without your asking, right? But I was just talking with a human design facilitator. I know that sounds like the weirdest description of a job title ever, but we are all designing meetings. We're all designing interactions. We're all designing programs, right? And a human design facilitator does it with the human in mind, that it's not about information, it's about connecting people. And if we're afraid to hear their feedback, then that's about us, right? We need to ask ourselves why. Do we feel like it's going to empower them? Do we feel like they're going to say things that we don't want to hear? Because, like you said, Patty, we can't change everything. When they come at you and say, we want women deacons, you like, that's above my pay grade, right? I can't change that. But even people just having a space to feel safe, to voice it, that they are heard, it builds trust. It builds a sense of we care about you, not just what you're going to do for us, right? And did you make it a goal to visit every parish in your
Yeah, so
archdiocese?
we're beginning with the deaneries
Mhm.
because we do have 212 parishes. So
Mhm.
realistically speaking, to get out and do that is an enormous feat. So we do go out when we can individually, and we have been doing that more frequently. But the first task was to visit those deanery meetings. So again, changing the name of the office gave an opportunity to say, oh, we need to come by so you can understand, and we want to explain and see what we can do for you, right? Always like, what can we do for you? How can we support you? So our PCLs, I think that our parish leaders, our lay leaders was in a sense low-hanging fruit and open, much more open sometimes than the clergy to just us coming in to visit or, but thankfully we have really forged a path there. And so those meetings are getting scheduled. They're getting, I did speak with the College of Deans. And so that's doing a few things for us. I think to go in and create that safe space in that context is a little bit more challenging because it does require vulnerability that maybe in that space doesn't always, I don't know, it doesn't always happen, right? But where we are doing, where we have been able to do it, and we've had a few meetings already so far, um, I just begin, this is the feedback that we've gotten from your parish catechetical leaders, and this is the reality before us. And I think when we feed that back to them, they're realizing that they're not alone, that this issue is not just at your parish. And that gives you permission then to be honest, that you can feel a little bit more comfortable that this isn't just about you and your parish. This is a bigger issue. The challenges and the opportunities are outside beyond that. And you can admit that, and admit that therefore then change is necessary. It's sort of opens up the way, right? The path for if I can be vulnerable and admit that, now I'm not alone. So I feel safer to say, okay, what are we going to now? Okay, so now we can also give ourselves permission to say, all right, maybe we need to move forward and change. Um, and so starting with those deaneries has been a good way even to be able to have the parishes be more receptive when we do go visit instead of, oh, this is a visit where I'm coming to supervise or spy or see what you're doing, but rather we've been invited now in a sense. Does that make, that's
Yeah.
why I liked your stealth word.
Yeah. Sometimes we got to be a little stealth. Uh, how have you helped guide your team at the diocese or the archdiocese on becoming better listeners and learning to have a relationship with PCLs that is one more of accompaniment rather than management?
Hmm. So, I'm sorry I have to go back to the COVID experience because it was during that time that we were without a director here, right? And so my colleague, it was only a staff, we went down from a staff of 7 to a staff of 2. And so my colleague and I, there was little, and this is not a criticism, it's just that th there was little pastoral care because there could be, because really we were faced with this enormous crisis and the pastoral care was going outwards, right? So we were thinking about what are ways that we can pray more together and what are ways that we can kind of find that pastoral care. And so we thought, I wonder what, and then our team started to grow. So then what evolved was a desire and we sought out somebody to walk with us as an office. It looks almost like group spiritual direction. And so we do this now once a month besides our regular prayer time. It is rooted in the word. We'll listen to scripture, share like Lectio Divina, pray, share, meditate on that, and practice really deeply listening to one another in that faith sharing context. And then, so how is God moving, right? How is God's word active in each one of us individually? And then as we're listening, right, then we're also listening for, okay, so how is God moving and how is this word active with us as a team, as a community, right? As a group of people, of individuals, right? So God's word is active in me, but it's also saying something to us, right? Collectively. And so that means we need to listen to one another and listen for what the pattern is there. Um, and that has really opened our hearts to one another, I think. And it's not always roses when you're working on a team, right? It's not always the honeymoon. Um, but it builds trust, and it helps us to practice. And the next step from that is, of course, okay, so if we're hearing this individually and now we're hearing this as a team, what is that saying about the next movement, the next step, or what are we being called to do as an office? And so we sort of then take that and bring it back to our pastoral planning, or just our office process, whatever it is, right? That has surfaced during that time.
And
Um,
is this something you teach PCLs to do with their teams?
So funny you should say that, because we were just moving in that direction. We just finished our directory deep dive kind of thing we were doing, which is like once a month we get together and we read and pray about a chapter and discuss it.
Mhm.
And the next step, we were saying we're gonna, probably do something like this, where we would gather PCLs once a month and provide them with this kind of experience, because it's the kind of thing that we really can't just do a workshop about, I mean, we can, but it also has to be lived out and experienced, and um, so yeah, but it really has been profoundly, deeply impactful for us, as a team, to kind of learn how to encounter, that art of accompaniment, and encountering the other person, the other, and really listening to them, despite whatever may have happened yesterday at the staff meeting.
Yeah, that's the tough part, you know. But this is where, I mean, this is how I coach any team at any parish. And that is, it's got to start with you living out and experiencing together what you want your parishioners to live out and experience in the parish. So we need to journey as disciples. We need to practice accompaniment. We need to pray together, pray for each other, show up for each other, show up to your coworkers' kids' Christmas recital. Like, be there for each other, accompany each other. And then we, do that for our PCLs, and then they experience it. And people tend to do for others what you do for them. And so if you're just very authoritative and directive and informational, don't be surprised that that's how they relate to parishioners, because that's what you've mentored them in. So I love what you're doing. I know you just did a convocation
Mhm.
for catechists. Tell us about what you guys did there.
Oh, that was great. And I'm just going to add something to that thought, John.
Mhm.
Evangelization is in word and in deed, right? And we do get, and I say this humbly because, everything is grace. I mean, I don't really have to say that here, but I think everybody, but just to put that out there, right? Everything is grace. But we do get feedback from our PCLs that say to us, you all work so well together. We can tell how you love one another. We can
Mhm.
tell how you work together so well. And that's a powerful witness. So I just, and I'm grateful to God for that. We are grateful to God for that. This convocation was excellent. We're really joyful. It's a conference. It is completely bilingual in English and Spanish, so it is quite a large event. We had upwards of 700 participants. That's not really counting all of the workshop presenters. And Julianne Stans was our keynote, and Dr. Dora Tovar was our keynote in Spanish. The day begins with beautiful liturgy, and Cardinal Tobin was in attendance, and it's one of his favorite events during the year. And just a beautiful spirit, a real joy. We had over 50 different workshops on everything you can possibly imagine, catechetically related, including all of this, also accompaniment, and with a really great, just really incredibly talented and gifted presenters and speakers. And also, our exhibitors, our publishers, how grateful we all are in diocesan work for the support of all of our publishers and our resources. So, the emphasis was on this evangelizing catechesis, and what does that look like when we and all the different forms that takes, right? Um, and so how does that get expressed? How do we practice that? Because I don't know that we're still so entrenched in teaching the content. So how do we do that in a way that's evangelizing, and how do we proclaim the kerygma? How do we share our stories in a way that's effective? So
Yeah.
that really was the thrust there.
Yeah, I think that just made me think about even your PCL training workshops or whatever you do like that. If you want catechesis to happen in a more catechumenal model where there's small group discussion and interaction, you've got to do that when you train your PCLs. You can't have them sit in rows and present to them for hours information and then say, now go be relational with your right with your catechist. You got to model for them. They'll experience it. Have great hospitality when they show up. If they have a name tag and there's a greeter and there's a table with their name on it, and there's like chocolates or mints or candies in the middle of the table, they go, oh, I'd like people to have this experience when they come to my workshops, right? But if they show up and it's hard to find the room that you're meeting in, and there's no signage and there's no greeter, and they wander in and it's kind of, they go, oh, okay, well, this is normal, right? So think about that. Anytime you bring them together is a grand opportunity to create the experience for them that you dream of people having in the parishes in your diocese. John Jelinek is on here from the Diocese of Rockford, Illinois, who I'm honored to be working with. And John, we were talking earlier about how you're helping use this 5 tasks from the new directory in shaping how you form PCLs and catechists. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would. Oh, I have to, there you go.
Thanks so much, John. Yeah, everything that Patty just said was right on the mark. We had within our diocese such an emphasis on CCD. Education was the focus of what we do. And my office represents within our office, it's schools, youth ministry, adult education, and religious education are clumped into one. And it all summed up to the common denominator was education. And so everything became an intellectual or scholastic approach. And so that was a very big struggle. We're also in the process of changing our name. We're going to be the Office of Lifelong Discipleship, is where we're going. So I'm very jealous to hear, Patty, that you beat us to changing the name, but it's wonderful stuff. I think that's the experience that we're all facing, and in no way are we opposed to that educational element, but it's only a little slice of the bigger picture. And so, working with our catechists, particularly, we had a program called our Catechist Certification program. It was an in-house program. It began 20 plus years ago, actually maybe even 30 years ago, and it had a few revisions, but it presumed when the catechist came into that program that they were evangelized, that they had a concept and they had an encounter and something beyond it. And we just began right off the bat with education. We're going to learn the 4 marks of the church and the liturgical seasons and all the wonderful things. And that model probably was perfect for the day and age when it was created. And we now have entered in a world where most of our catechists that are really in our parishes have not been evangelized, have not had an encounter. And so we began starting out saying we need to reform this program. When we did the same thing, we changed the name from being the catechist certification. This is about getting a degree, a certificate in education. We made it now, it's the catechist formation program, because we're trying to work on the whole person. And the hammer which we were able to use to bring into this is the directory now, which so calls us to follow these 5 tasks of catechesis and also the catechumenate model. And so we really have based our program now. So instead of starting out with doctrine, our first sessions are on the catechist's encounter, understanding how God is calling them, the invitation to intimacy, understanding their witness and being able to articulate their witness, and what's God's story, what's my story, and how do those intersect is what we're doing. So now, instead of just throwing them into becoming teachers, we're working on forming them as disciples there at the beginning. So that would be our encounter phase, the pre-catechumenate phase. And once we've taken them through that kind of process, we then enter into, we have two other areas of competency, we call them, but one is ministerial and one is doctrinal. So this would be more like the catechumenate. This is where we're going to dive into what it is we need to know, what we need to understand. So how, when we show up in the classroom, we're not teaching heresy, we're going to be able to effectively articulate it. And that's in our doctrinal section. But then we have a ministerial section, and this is where we're trying to teach them the craft, the art of delivering it, so that it isn't just as we've talked about, kind of information being blasted at the kids, which just, as is, I think all of us recognize, doesn't work anymore. CCD, religious education as a school model, is a failed model in our current generation. And so how do we do that? And so really working on hospitality and helping them be able to understand, how do I relate to this group? How do I actually meet them where they are and work on them? Also, what is the dynamics of working in family ministry, which has been a big movement within our diocese, away from at least half of our parishes now are doing some kind of family program. So giving them the skills to be able to minister beyond, to think beyond just working with kids, and to beyond working in a classroom model, to help them to go into. And John, you said it perfectly there at the beginning. Our traditional program that we had been working with, we would get up for 2 hours and lecture the catechist and the parish catechetical leaders, and then say, now you go back and be dynamic. Don't do it like I just did it for you. And so we weren't modeling what we were asking them to do. And so by changing this and following a kind of a catechumenate model of growth, we're really able to work on that element of, instead of this being a classroom, let's have this be a place of dialogue, have this be a place where we're going to look at how God has really entered into our life and changed us. So that's kind of what we're working on there, and trying to push that beyond our catechists even.
Fantastic. I mean, this is so encouraging to me. Everything I've seen, especially in the last year or two, in family faith formation, and now with the new directory and the direction, and really that the USCCB is not content with that thing just being released out there. They are really pushing to, and much credit goes to Julianne Stans for the voice she is with them, to really make this happen in parishes. I encourage you to go to Patty's website. And Ellen, if you'll put the link in there again for, they have a beautiful website for the Office of Lifelong Faith Formation. And it is beautiful and it is modern. And it, if you're wanting to engage younger catechists in the next generation, they can't go to everything else and then go to your website and it looks like it was created in 1985 on like GeoCities or something. Like, you can't convince them that, yes, we're relevant. Just don't look at our website, right? So I love this, their statement that the Office of Lifelong Faith Formation equips and accompanies leaders called by their baptism who serve in parishes and Catholic schools to facilitate lifelong encounters with Jesus Christ that form missionary disciples. And that last statement, facilitate lifelong encounters with Christ that form missionary disciples. That's it, right? Not to teach them to facilitate the learning of information and doctrine. That's step 4, right, out of the 5 steps. So not that there's anything wrong with it, but we've all known a lot of people that are full of information and doctrine that you wonder if they've ever actually encountered Christ before when you meet them. Let's hear from you guys. I would love to hear any questions you have or comments. Any of this stirred any thoughts in you or great things that you've seen out there? Will you please just raise a hand and Ellen will unmute you and let you share that with us. Patricia had her hand up, is what I saw there.
Hello, everyone, and thank you. I'm in New Brunswick, Canada, and with the Diocese of St. John, and geographically, we're huge. We have 3 cities, but other than that, the rest of it is all rural. So it's parishes are small, and were widespread. And I'm it for as the director of catechesis. But what our diocese did employ last October was a gentleman who went through, graduated from Steubenville University, and his job is missionary discipleship formation. So we work together very closely so that we can, I still help the catechists with what's happening on the ground and in the parishes, but he's helping with their personal formation. So we are leaning towards that. One of the other things that we are doing as well is trying to change over to family catechesis, recognizing that the old ways don't work. And I'm sure everybody can relate to the youth being active in so many clubs, sports, that type of thing, that because we do not have Catholic schools, everything has to be done either on the weekend or if we can get an evening, but to get a time for families, to get a time for the families even to bring their children is really probably one of our hardest hurdles to get over. So one of the things, lifelong formation, I love it, because we're all looking at that. I was, the director of religious education, which, just automatically puts everyone thinking we're in rows. Everyone turn to page 12 and we'll talk about it. So when we change it to catechesis, we're trying to build it that it is different. I do host a catechist retreat for our diocese. And hospitality is one of my huge things that I always want everyone to feel, welcomed. And we have dynamic speakers every time. But again, then it gets into, because of travel, all of those things, you only get it maybe one or two catechists from, 2/3 maybe of your areas. So it's tough. We're not everybody can get the same message, the same feeling, get on the same page, because geographically it's tough. So that's probably one of my biggest hurdles. Even though we have Zoom, it's still, out of all the parish coordinators that we only have 2 that are paid employees. Everybody else is volunteer, and the majority of them have a day job. And their day job could also mean that they work evenings. So for me to even try to say, oh, well, let's have a Zoom, I still can't get the ones that I really need to get because their work schedules are crazy. And when they finally have 5 minutes, they're at their church trying to be with the kids. So I'm sure everybody else can help relate, but those are some of the challenges that I'm facing here by myself in the Diocese of St. John.
Patricia, when you said we do have Zoom, if you offer like a hybrid where some people can join via Zoom, do you just not have a good response, or have you done that?
Yeah, and the same with Zoom. I can have the same Zoom meeting 5 or 6 times, but there's still always somebody that missed getting their email. And because a lot of them are volunteers, they're not checking their emails, like you would if it's a job, or you're, so yeah, I'll get people that, so I do Zoom, I do everything, that I possibly can to meet people, phone calls, that type of thing as well. But when you're talking, a lot of people all over the place, it's time consuming to try that. Just assume everybody's anxious to hear from you, but they got their lives too.
Is anybody else that's on here in a similar demographic or like environment where you've got a lot of rural or people that are more isolated, further away from you, that you're overseeing? Chi, Della, either one of you want to speak to that? Let's see. Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm from the Diocese of Richmond, Virginia, and I'm relatively new to diocesan leadership responsibilities, just a few months. But what I'm learning about our diocese, it's so widespread. So if you know Virginia at all, the top part, Northern Virginia, That's the only part that's not our diocese. That's the Diocese of Arlington, but everywhere else in Virginia is the Diocese of Richmond. So from Richmond, which is more central, to the west, it's 6 hours. It can be 5-6 hours. So we have 3 vicariates, the eastern part being very populated, central fairly so, but the western vicariate is just filled with a lot of rural parishes, several clusters of parishes. And one of the things that I've been really impressed with our team here, this happened well before I got here, but our director, one of her initiatives was to have the entire Office of Christian Formation go out to do parish visits, and to really, the office has always had a really good relationship with all the parishes, but it's about connection, right? So even if they know that you're doing good things, right, they don't really know who you are, all the things that you do, there's a challenge there. And so when they went out, they made several like weekend trips, and knowing that it was not going to be always like that, right? Knowing that they were limited time, that within this year, this is when we're going to do those trips, to kind of limit the travel, but visiting 2 or 3 parishes at a time, clusters. And she was very intentional, reaching out to the pastor and gathering as many of the staff and volunteers in all the different ministries. So oftentimes we would have meetings with, 10, 15 people, even at a medium-sized parish, of everybody involved, paid staff, volunteers, all that type of thing. And it was very helpful. It was very helpful because, you could tell, even though she explained that this was not like some audit or formal visit, right? We're just here to talk and listen and see how we can support them. Sometimes the initial reaction was always, the diocese is here, right? Like, what do they want? What are they going to say? But after the conversation part, it was just really helpful. And we saw the fruits of that even at the past few months of our different trainings and things like that. People from the West that we'd never seen before, they weren't very engaged before, were coming to these trainings. They knew us, right? And so every time we go out now, our director always says, like, you're not going to go to a party where you don't know who's there, you don't know who's invited, you don't know who's hosting, you're not going to go. But now, they know us, right? And they're coming to the party.
That is so important. I'm so glad you said that. And, we can never get everybody to show up, but I will tell you that personal invitation is the biggest, most successful thing. So, Patricia, you were talking about emails and people miss emails, and that they do. But a phone call, even with an old-fashioned voicemail, if you don't get a hold of them, that says, hey, I was just thinking of you. I just wanted to let you know we're doing this. We would love for you to be there. I know those things are labor intensive, but when we look at the results of just emailing people, it's worth the time and energy. I look at an invitation as a call, an email, and a text. If you can do all 3, you really know that you've reached them. So, and also, Cheetah, what you're saying, knowing people by name, when you've seen someone face to face, it's much harder for them to say no than if you're just this person at the diocese that they've gotten emails from. That's a whole different ballgame. So thank you for sharing that. Is it Delia or Delia?
Delia.
Delia, great.
Delia.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Shreveport, Louisiana.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I just related to Patricia that and maybe I don't make enough phone calls, but the same thing. You try to offer events, you try to offer retreats, you try to engage, and the response is minimal. And I struggle with it. It's hard. It's hard to start planning something again when the last couple times not many people came. And I have also tried very hard since I got here. I've only been here a couple of years, to introduce family formation as well. And I've gotten just a huge pushback on it. Nobody is interested. Nobody. And I've had a couple try it for 1 year, which it does, I tell them before they start, you gotta do it for a few years by the time people will get it. But But what surprised me about family formation that I didn't expect from my previous experience of family formation is how they have their catechists are pushing back against it. That they're afraid that, it seems to me that they're afraid they're going to lose their identity as being catechists. And also they've spent years, I feel like years, criticizing parents for not being involved and criticizing parents because they don't teach their kids, and and now to give it back over to their parents is like, well, they won't do it. They absolutely will not do it. And I try to say, I think we should have raise the bar on these parents and give them and give them the resources to do what they need to do, what they can do. I mean, we have to lift them up. So that's
yeah, I mean, those are very real challenges that a lot of folks are facing. I would encourage everybody to watch the last two webinars I did with Julianne Stans and Stephen Seraphin on a new vision for faith formation, a new vision for catechesis, because it does require a few things. One, the old catechists, they may not be wired for this new vision. But we also need to be compassionate towards them, because when you go read the old 6 tasks, they're just doing what they were taught. Task number 1, teach doctrine, right? And that's what they're doing. So we need to be compassionate towards them, and bring them along as much as they're willing, but some will not be willing. And it's the old, new wine and old wineskins. You can't make this new vision happen with people who are unwilling to be relational. But the other thing that I would really encourage you to instill in your catechist is empathy for the parents that are resistant to being involved.
Amen.
And I always use my example of my friend Jennifer for this. Jennifer is a cradle Catholic. Jennifer went through Catholic education. She went to Notre Dame. She did it all. She did the whole deal. Married in a Catholic church, divorced, annulled, all of that. Jennifer hasn't been to Mass in years. Both of her daughters are in Catholic school, in sacramental prep and all of that. And they're young teens now, and they're in confirmation. And I said, Jennifer, why are your kids in Catholic school, and why do you have them going through confirmation? Well, it's just, I feel like it's good. I feel like it's what they should do. And I said, if you don't want to go, why do you want to force them to go? Like, if you don't think it's helpful to you, why would it be helpful to them? Jennifer doesn't know how to answer that question. And Jennifer doesn't know what she believes. When she looks at her views about issues that the church contradicts, when she looks at her experience in the church, she doesn't know what she believes. So when you tell Jennifer that you're your child's primary catechist, she's like, are you kidding me? I don't even know what I believe. How can I be my child's primary teacher? And so Jennifer needs somebody who's willing to meet her where she's at and say, Jennifer, it's okay that you don't have it figured out. It's okay that you're wrestling with this stuff. You still belong here. And you're not the only one that feels that way. And we're going to journey with you. And when your kid has questions, come to us. We'll talk about it together. That's the kind of accompaniment that Jennifer needs. And as long as she just continues to get guilted and shamed into showing up for things, family catechesis family faith formation is never going to be something that she wants to be a part of. But it really is going to will require losing people. It'll require losing participants and losing catechists and starting smaller. But I can say I've seen many places that they were willing to take that risk. And the few that did it built relationships with other people in their life stage. And they began to tell their friends about it. And their friends said, oh, I want to go to that parish because I want to hang out with those people and connect. Yeah, it's Julianne. If I quote Julianne Stans way too much, I'm sorry. But she says, discipleship moves at the speed of relationship. And the currency of relationship is time. And there's no getting around that. And Jesus did it. Jesus started with 12 and said, we're taking this thing global. But they did for others what he did for them. He walked with them. He was patient with them. He spent time with them. He got frustrated with them sometimes. but he walked with them. Kenneth, you've been patiently waiting there with your hand raised, but I loved what you shared in the chat about what you guys are doing in Chicago. Tell us more. Oh, let me unmute you.
Sure. Hi. Thank you, everyone. So yes, so we started in 2016 with the changes in the department. We had an office for family ministries, an office for young adults, an office for youth ministry and catechesis, an office, different offices. So we made a change, a major change in the department, starting with an emphasis on lifelong formation for our office, and now we have marriage prep, adult confirmation, youth ministry, catechesis and family. I'm the senior coordinator for catechist formation because, as Jan mentioned, we are not promoting a catechist certification that is just a requirement for catechists to feel that they're equipped when they are not formed. So we're moving in the direction of catechist formation. And the Office of Lifelong Formation is with the promises of we're going from womb to tomb. So we're also paying attention to the baptismal preparation because that's part of the important piece that families are engaged. Then we have catechetical formation with emphasis of catechetical leaders being accompanied. The challenge that we face in many cases with catechetical leaders and even pastors saying, you downtown people, you're bringing a lot of stuff to us, things that maybe are not useful for us. That's a valid point, because for many years, historically, we as an archdiocese, we were just proposing plans for them and not even paying attention to, number one, the catechetical leader is a full-time, part-time, has a budget, how many other hats are wearing like RCIA, sacristans, many things that are happening in the parish life. And now, starting with example of catechist formation, we mentioned to catechetical leaders that we're pausing the certification because we want to really pilot a way that catechists are engaged, are formed and accompanied, and also catechetical leaders are listened. So we have this pilot, and we did some training for catechetical leaders, explaining this new format of formation, which is we'll provide the videos and resources and a facilitator guide, so they learn what this is about, and we ask them to do it themselves, with the premise that we are asking catechetical leaders to be physically the spiritual leaders, the master catechists of their catechist. And with that, catechetical leaders are also providing feedback, saying, Kenneth, Mary Ellen, who is my partner in crime, I think she's here. And we've been coordinating with catechetical leaders in English and Spanish. And they will give us honest feedback. Kenneth, this is helpful. This is not helpful. Kenneth, this is taking too much of my time. I'm asking my deacon to do it for me. My catechists are not attending. My catechists love it. So we have data that we can relate later and bring it to the department saying, we need X amount of money. We need budget. We need this because these people like these resources and we need to continue moving on. The only piece that we are paying attention more here in Chicago is we don't want catechists to be overwhelmed with information. We want them to be formed. We want them to have a space for dialogue and to build community among themselves. So the courses that we provide has some spaces for personal reflection, group discussions, and then building community with also some practices that we do after the sessions that they are taking, some action ideas. And with that, we're emphasizing to catechetical leaders that it's not about them getting pictures of the PowerPoint or getting copies of the presentations. It's actually practicing and owning what we are presenting to them, because that's the only way that we're forming disciples and they are becoming witnesses. So that's kind of the shift in the more academic, more, as Jan mentioned, more scholastic way to a more personal experience, doctrine based, but is more witnessing for catechists to be part of that transformation process. Mm-hmm. and also to be mindful and not forget to mention that when we talk about lifelong formation, we need to be mindful that it's a natural process for the children to start maybe baptismal prep and having the parents to be formed in a more evangelized and be formed in the sacramental life of the parish. But also when they complete confirmation, they need to have a support with the youth ministry. That many parishes are not connecting the dots. They're finishing confirmation and they continue using the term CCD, which is now religious education, because it's communion confirmation done. And that's what is happening. Our youth are not engaging after confirmation, not necessarily because religious education was not engaging, but because there's no parishes do not have a youth ministry because they don't have a budget, or they say, well, youth are not interested. They are. And parents are also very interested because I also participate in some formation for parents. They invite me to give some talks. And parents, they are desperate, in need of accompaniment about faith, especially when it comes to dealing in communication and behavior with their kids. And they expect that religious education is going to make a miracle and make them change, immediately. But it's also a process when we engage parents in the dialogue and they are willing to listen. This is my experience and I'm seeing it. I've been doing it with a more Hispanic community, but when I go to the English-speaking community, they have the same needs, and they're also always looking into the religious side as the support for their family life. And that's something that we're still wondering how we're gonna make that work, but at least little steps and moving forward, and God willing, we want to continue moving, providing resources for them.
Thank you, Kenneth. It's great stuff. I'm so glad you shared that. It's when you talk about connecting the dots, Stephen Seraphin, who I've had on a couple of these, talks about it starts at marriage prep, right? If you do marriage prep in a way that's relational and is discipling and forming and connecting and giving them a vision for their family and a mission for their family, they're much more likely to understand that at baptism prep and in between. I've seen parishes that do something called the First Five, and it's a ministry to couples in their first 5 years of marriage. That's another way to connect the dots so that they don't just disappear until the next sacrament. But if you do marriage prep in a way that's just check the boxes, you met with the pastor, you jumped through the hoops, you got married at our parish, don't be surprised when you don't see them again until baptism, because that's what you set them up for, really. So it really is a holistic thing. I want to honor everybody's time. I know we've run over a little bit here. Thank you for hanging on. I want to tell you about a few things coming up. One is that my webinar next week is actually with a priest from Chicago, which is where Kenneth is. Father Peter Wojcik, who's kind of an Instagram star, at Chicago Priest is his handle. He's going to talk about Gen Z and Alpha. And I would encourage you to join, and I'd encourage you to send this out to your catechists. We're going to be talking about ministering to the very age groups that they're working with, right? With children, at least, and that they're helping people parent. So I'm actually going to have a actual Gen Zer on the webinar, a real authentic specimen of this life form. We call them Zoomers, but he's great. Freddie he's actually from St. Paul Inside the Walls, an evangelization center there in New Jersey, and Freddie Garcia. He's fantastic. Such a great heart, so humble. So I'm excited to have him on there. So I'll be sending that out to you in an email after this. There was an interview I did with Adrian Herrera from the Archdiocese of Houston, who talks about what they're doing. And since my screen share didn't work, we had to switch. But I'm going to email a link to you to watch that. It's just a 20-minute conversation with him. And he is specifically also talking about the difference between doing this in a Spanish-speaking context and an English-speaking context. And culturally, do we need to make any changes there? Essentially, the Anglos need to become more like the Spanish speakers as well. We need to be more relational. We need to have more fun. We need to hang around afterwards and talk more. And but I'll be sending that to you. And I'm also, if you don't mind, I'm going to send out an email with the list of the people that registered for this with your emails. If you don't want to be included in that, please let me know. But Taylor, I don't want anyone here ever to feel alone in what they're doing. And there is a community here. 20 of you have hung around for more than an hour. Almost everyone that logged on at this at the beginning has hung around for the entire thing. That's not what happens on a webinar. And that's because you're connecting with each other and you have a community here. So I'm going to send that out. Let me know if you don't want to be included in that, and I'll wait till tomorrow and pull your information out of that. That's all I got for today. Thank you so much for hanging in there. You guys have been great, and I'll be sending you a link to watch this or share it later. Thank you all. God bless you. Take care.